I need some traction. You need some traction.
Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of our Traction webinar series. Just waiting for some more people to file into the room here. Excited about our session today. But before I get into it, just wanted to say Traction is brought to you by Boast.ai, Launch Academy, Growth Brazers, Founders Institute, Lazaritas Institute, and BCF Ventures. Thanks again for subscribing and joining us. We've got a great session here today. We will do recordings of this and we'll send it around to everybody, so don't worry. And definitely check out the Boast.ai website for our events, where you'll see hundreds of recorded sessions from our Traction webinar series. You can check out different topics. So go check that out at Boast.ai if you'd like and you have some time. Excited for today's session. Today we've got Sam Jacobs, the founder and CEO of Pavilion, the premier community and career development platform for high growth leaders and their teams in every function. Sam launched Pavilion as Revenue Collective in 2016. That wasn't even that long ago. That's amazing. And you bootstrapped to 10 million in ARR before taking on any money. When did you guys rebrand? You went from Revenue Collective to Pavilion. When did you do that?
June 22nd.
Oh, so super recent. Okay. All right. All right. Now everybody. So Revenue Collective up until now we're Pavilion. That's fantastic. And you just took on a big growth round of $25 million. Is that right?
That's right. That's right. Led by, they call themselves a boutique VC called Elephant Ventures, based in Boston and New York.
Oh, it's fantastic. Fantastic. So I know I've heard of Revenue Collective and now Pavilion, and excited to dive into it, learn a little bit more about that today. And then prior to Pavilion, you spent about 15 years as a senior revenue leader at a bunch of different VC-backed companies in the New York area. That's right? Yeah. That's fantastic. And you're out in the New York area. Well, thanks for coming in, and excited to dive into this today, learn a little bit more about Pavilion and yourself and even your background and your history. Why don't we start with that? I'd love to hear about like the career experience that led up to Pavilion and you launching it. Why don't we start with a little bit of a background about yourself?
Sure. And thanks for having me, and always great to partner with Boast and Traction. It's an incredible community. So congrats on all the success. Obviously,
Thank you.
I'm a fan of communities. My background is I grew up overseas, but essentially from the DC area, Washington, DC, because my parents worked for the US government, the State Department. Then I went to undergrad, came out of undergrad, and went into investment banking in 1999. That was the first dot-com boom. I wanted to do something entrepreneurial, so I started a record label. That did not go well at all. That was a huge failure for a lot of different reasons. And I came back to New York in 2003, and that's when kind of things got going, and I started working for venture capital backed and private equity backed companies, and kind of rising up as sort of a revenue leader. And my stints were 7.5 years at a really successful company called Gerson Lerman Group, 4.5 years at a company called Axial, 18 months at a place called Livestream, 9 months at a place called The Muse, 10 months at a place called Behaveox. That's through 2018. So my background is that, as you can tell, my stints were getting shorter and shorter and shorter and shorter with every subsequent company. 4 out of those 5 companies I was fired from. And I started Revenue Collective really to help myself because I had the feeling that I was on a merry-go-round, on a carousel, and that I didn't have a clear line of sight towards the outcomes that I was trying to achieve in my career, like, make an impact, last longer than a year and a half, have a group of people that I love coming to work with every day, and see success with, generate wealth, all of those things that we all go to work for. I was having trouble. I was starting to lose my ability to like clearly see them. And so, and I realized I wasn't alone. So, one of the bullet points, the talking points that I always talk about is that the average tenure for a high growth executive at a venture capital backed company is 17 months. And that's for a bunch of different reasons. It's not necessarily that there's like some evil person out there that's firing us, but the reality is that careers have never been more unstable, while how we do all of the things that we do is changing by the day because of technology. So I started Revenue Collective really just in New York to help bring together my friends so that we could, hug each other and cry together, so that we could share best practices, and so that we could help each other find jobs, and really to form a community so that we would have some kind of bulwark against the forces at play in the broader market. And I really never thought, I mean, first it was free. Then when I was fired from the Muse in 2017, I said, I need to make some extra money so that so that all of my money income isn't just from my employer. So that's when we started charging dues. Even then, it was like side passive revenue. I assumed that every city had a sales executive club, a marketing executive club. That Toronto did have something, I forget what it was called. So I just assumed I'll just do this for New York. Then I was fired from Behavox at the end of 2018. And I said, what if I work on this full time? If I can get it to 2,000 people by the end of 2020, paying members, then based on the way that US tax laws work, which means like a lot of your life can be a business expense, 2,000 people is enough for me and my wife, and our dogs to live happily. And so that was, and again, I never expected it to become what it has since become. We're now in, I think, over 100 different cities. We're, as of today, about 5,300 different members. And yeah, we rebranded June 22nd to Pavilion. We raised our first outside capital. We closed 2 acquisitions, and we have set our sights on something bigger than when I left my job at the Muse back in 2017.
Like, what is leading to this trend of high turnover of executives? Can you put your finger on it, or is it not that easy?
I have a point of view on it. I think it's what we were talking about before we started recording, Russ, which is,
yeah.
I think that there's never been, broadly defined, putting the last 2 years aside, I think returns in equities markets have not been that great as a consequence. And capital is more globalized than ever before, right? Like to the point of Saudis being the biggest investor in SoftBank. So there's more money than ever before. It's looking for returns. It flows into alternative investments, which is venture capital and private equity. So they have money to deploy. That means that companies are getting started because there's capital available to start them. Also, the cost of starting a company has been declining. So what that means is that there's all of these different companies that all raised a specific kind of capital, which is like high growth expectations, and there's more of them. So the talent pool is more diffuse. By definition, there's more people that haven't done it because there's just way more companies. Right. So I think it's the intersection. And then meanwhile, the human race has never had a shorter attention span and less patience. And so I think like we're at this point where there's so much money, so many people are in all of these different roles. It's not that we're not qualified. It's just that there's very explicit growth expectations because that is what venture capital is trying to do. It's jet fuel. Every company needs to, triple twice and double 3 times. And so there's massive growth expectations and a lot of people that haven't done it before. And then I guess the final thing, to the point of like what we might talk about later, is that I also think there's just a fundamental misunderstanding about how money is made. And so I think like salespeople, specifically sales leaders, we've backed ourselves into a corner a little bit. And I think we need to like find our way out of it, even though there might be some sacrifice required.
So what do you, this is great. What do you mean by that? What are we backing ourselves into a corner? Because I'm a sales leader myself, and I really think about it from a revenue perspective myself. So I don't want to back myself into a corner. Tell me more.
Okay, well, we're all used to the idea that sales leaders, right? I think the comp framework for account executives is not broken. I think that basically works. But I think the idea that the sales leader specifically, as opposed to the marketing product or other leader or customer success leader, they are typically paid differently than the other executives. They are typically paid the most. And often they're paid, like it's a point of pride and it's a point of kind of urgency that like we have, the highest OT on target earnings of anybody at the company. And so what happens is, and we're also paid 50-50, right? So like 50% base, 50% quote unquote commission, or, based on hitting the revenue targets. So I think that whole framework fundamentally misunderstands how money is made. I don't think, to your point about the word revenue, I think revenue is a team sport, and it's not just a sales sport at all. It's never been so true today that like the account executive is not, we want to be the hero, but we don't want to be the scapegoat. we can't be either. We probably just need to be part of the team. We probably just need to be we probably need to be paid what the other executives are paid on the same bonus structure, which is a company-wide bonus structure based on attainment of a target. But we're all used to saying, I'm a chief revenue officer, I make 600,000 US a year, 300,000 base. It's going to be painful to say, well, the other, the head of marketing makes 250 base, and he or she gets a 20 or 30% end of year bonus. Like, that's how you should be paid too, probably.
Right.
So that's what I mean by backing ourselves into a corner. Like, we negotiate really, really hard on cash going in, and it puts a target on our back to say that, like, hey, if you don't hit the number, you're fired. That's the game. That's the game that we sign up for. And I think that that's not how money is made anyway. Like I said, I think money is made because you have an incredible product that people love, and then marketing creates messaging around that product and use cases and deploys that to the right people at the right time. And then the sales team harnesses what has been created, which is awareness and attention and interest, AIDA, and they turn it into money. But that's and then customer success retains it and expands it. And that's a whole life cycle. That's not just one team. So
right.
That's part of to the point of like the webinar, that's like a fundamental misunderstanding that I think people just still can't grapple with, that like revenue is generated across the experience. Revenue is the outcome of an experience that somebody has with your product. It's not just like the thing the sales team does.
Yeah. I mean, I totally get that. I'm totally aligned with that. I see that even with like, talking about attribution models. And if there isn't, marketing teams abandon successful campaigns because they can't figure out the attribution, and it can't be directly attributed, and you give it up. And it's like, the sales team is like, you can't give that up. That's like covering fire when I'm trying to close a deal. You need to ramp that up. And I'm sorry you're not getting the recognition for it, but we need to figure out a way that we're working together collectively to get this done. And I totally see that. And I can see how now I get the backing into a corner, because if you let that happen, when you sign up and you negotiate your deal and your role, you backed yourself into a corner. So I can see how that can happen very quickly.
Yeah. And it's why it's like the product person, they have much more stable tenures than we do, but we're all doing the same thing basically. So I think to your point, marketing in many ways has it tougher because of this attribution question, which makes it really, really hard. And, part of me wants to remove attribution as a KPI for marketing, and really, but I understand that makes it even more difficult because you still need to know like where the ROI is on the dollars that you're spending. But
right.
I advocate that. I mean, I want like marketing to be gold on the same thing that sales is gold on, which is the same thing that product is gold on, which is all like, did we hit the revenue number? What's churn? What's NPS?
Absolutely. That makes a ton of sense for sure. So, and with that, and it's a great comment there. So I guess going through all of these different experiences was really the lead up for launching Pavilion. And like, that was just like, it teed it up for it. So why don't we dive into Pavilion a little bit? Like, so you just started it in New York, and then it kind of grew from there. Why don't we start, for those people who might not know Pavilion, why don't you do a quick high level just introduction to it so we can kind of get all on the same page?
Sure. We are the tagline, which, we'll see if it makes sense to anybody, a transformational gathering place for high growth leaders and their teams, which I like that phrase. But what does it mean? We started as a sales and marketing community, and community is the name of the game these days. Everybody's talking about it. But we are community with a purpose. And the purpose is what I call career enablement, which is my career, right? Which is like shorter and shorter stints, way more volatility and uncertainty. I created Pavilion as a counterbalance to that reality, so that if companies themselves don't have the expertise or the bandwidth to provide, or the tenure, right, to provide like career development on a scale that extends past a year and a half, that might be okay. But then there needs to be something that we're all part of that does take care of us, where we are the customer, right? Like in most of the working world, we're the employee, we're not really the customer. It's like a very explicit trade, and not super beneficial for us as employees relative to, the owners of the company, which is okay. I'm a huge fan of capitalism, but The point is, like Pavilion is a career platform powered by community. So we have 5,200 people across a few, bunch of different functional areas and across a couple levels of seniority. And the idea is that you pay to be a member, you join, and you get access to a host of resources, products and services that help you navigate your career, depending on where you are in your journey. So that means that we have Pavilion University, a bunch of schools that you can take. So you can take CRO school. If you're a VP of sales, want to figure out what do you need to do to be a CRO, you take a 16-week program with us included in your membership that helps train you there. And we've got 13 different schools depending on what functional leader you were in. We have obviously the community itself where you can ask questions in real time. Hey, does anybody have a demand gen playbook for a cybersecurity company? And somebody say, here you go, and I'll hop on the phone with you for 30 minutes. So there's peer-to-peer learning that happens, really that's like 24-hour a day Q&A that people can access. There's mentoring and coaching, right? Because maybe what you need is somebody to talk to once a month that's been there, done that. That's just a few years ahead of you in your career. There's also small councils, basically mastermind groups of peers that you would meet with once a month, 10 to 15 to 20 people that you get to know over time so that you can share in a trusted space the challenges that you're working on. All of these are, and then there's even stuff like a legal hotline. So you get fired, you're in trouble, you need a lawyer, you need a quick recommendation on a potential situation. We can connect you with a lawyer, we can connect you with an accountant, we can connect you with a career coach. So it's an entire suite of services, the purpose of which is to help you get where you want to go in your career. That's what we're doing. It's powered by community, but it's not community for its own end. It is community to help you navigate your career more effectively so that you sleep better at night, you feel more confident in your job, you don't feel alone. And frankly, the odds that you get whatever it is that you want, you get to be a CEO, you get to make a bunch of money, you get to have great friendships, you get to treat your wife or husband or partner better because you're not so stressed out about work. All of those are outcomes that we're trying to facilitate.
Yeah, it makes a ton of sense. So, and then for memberships, is it, have you expanded? Is it across the board now, like all products, or is it still sales and marketing? Is there certain seniority, or what's the level?
Yeah, we made a bunch of announcements on the 22nd. So we will be in every area over time.
Cool.
This fall, we're launching a finance community and we're launching a CEO community because now I'm a CEO. So now I'm protective of that group of people. Over time, there'll be an HR pavilion. There'll be a general, a legal pavilion. And then we also launched a community for people that are new to the workforce. So we previously only had associate level people for director to VP and then executive for VP and above, but we didn't have anything if you're an SDR or an AE. So now we've introduced that as well. So basically now you can join Pavilion from the moment that you enter the workforce to the moment that you retire. And hopefully we're building stuff to make it better, easier, give you the playbook, give you the answers to the test. And really,
that's amazing. Amazing. And are you still North America based, or have you expanded outside North America yet?
Oh, we're global.
You are global. Oh, fantastic.
Yeah,
okay.
We've got our second biggest chapter is London.
Nice. All right.
We've got Munich, Oslo, Stockholm, Singapore, India.
Very cool.
All over. And I can talk obviously at great length about it. I don't want to make it just an ad for Pavilion. The last thing I will say, like the fundamental thing that we're actually working on is not any of the stuff that I just mentioned. What it is, and this sounds like really grandiose, so I apologize, but hopefully there's some authenticity that comes across. Really what Pavilion is about a way of behaving. So what happens when you join is that you go into a few Slack channels and you ask them questions, and you're always so surprised that people are so helpful. And that's because when you join, we say, hey, as part of being a member, of course we want your money, because it's a paid membership, but we also expect you to give before you get, to look for opportunities to help other people. And when you do that, it's kind of it's a light bulb moment. It's a moment of epiphany for a bunch of people because they have forgotten in this cold-hearted world that we're in. Sometimes you forget that helping other people is not just altruistic. It's not a sacrifice at all. but it actually can be a path to your own personal development and your own personal enrichment. And so we are trying to create a different world than the world that is most common outside of Pavilion, where we're teaching as many people as we can that by being a good, compassionate, kind person and helping other people, there's not a finite set of resources in the world. There's not a finite amount of wealth, that 1,000 flowers can bloom and many of us can help each other. If we believe it, sometimes people just need to see a model of the behavior. And the way that the internet has been designed, which is basically it's free, right? So we become the product. We are Facebook's product. We are Instagram's product. Our behavior is the product that they sell to advertisers. We're all just used to this world of a business that's designed around kind of self-congratulation, broadcast, self-branding, broadcasting yourself, that the world is sort of like every person out for themselves and you got to project the biggest image about yourself to the rest of the world. And that's all based on, it's derived from these business models actually. And so we're trying to build a different business model, and in so doing, build a different kind of world. And I know it sounds a little, I don't know what it sounds like, but that's really what we're trying to do. We're trying to teach people that like nice people can finish first, that nice people don't have to finish last, that you can win by being a good person. That's the project.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting. You've tapped into something. I think humans by nature do want to help other people, but often how can somebody help somebody in a convenient or easy way, or a way that doesn't impact their day, because everybody's got a day job, right? So how can I help people while not taking away from my day job at the same time? Because people do want to help each other. And I think you've tapped into that perfectly, which is super awesome. One thing I wanted to ask, so you bootstrapped up until 10 million. And I know community-led growth has been a massive topic. Were you looking for capital? Did capital come knocking on your door? We were talking about how frothy the market is right now. Was it a combination of both?
We were not looking for capital. No, we were not. I was having a lot of fun because we were profitable. And, as the sole founder, I don't have co-founders, I didn't have a boss, so it was really freeing, and it was a beautiful thing, just to be able to create and invent. We didn't have revenue targets. There was a moment in 2019. We do now. We have a forecast. We're a regular company now, but in 2019, there was this moment because we were all word of mouth and applications had slowed down for a week. And I called our head of operations, Anne, and I said, "Oh, applications are slow." And I was freaking out about it. And I was used to freaking out about it because I'm used to being a VP of sales, where like, if you miss the quarter, you're going to get fired. And I realized, all I need to do is like pay rent. It's like, I don't have to figure out about anything. As long as we're breaking even, like everything's actually fine. That was an incredible moment. So no, we weren't looking for money. We, like you, during COVID, traction grew very significantly over the last year and a half. So did we. And we pivoted to digital, and we went from, we grew very significantly, almost 5x in terms of ARR. And so I got an email. I was not looking for capital, but I do take every call. And I also didn't think that the type of deal that I wanted to do would be possible, which is, frankly, there'd be a component of secondary so that like I could take money off the table, but also importantly, that we could set aside a large chunk of money for the employees as a cash bonus. That basically, like, the pitch to the investors wasn't just give us money. It was like, I'm going to be distributing this money not onto the balance sheet, but into the employees that help build this company, even if they don't have super large equity positions. So I didn't know if that was possible. I sent I took a call with Elephant Ventures. They said, if you can send us financials, we'll give you a read on valuation. I sent them financials. They said, can you send it to us by quarter? Because obviously they wanted to see quarterly growth rate. I said, I know how to use QuickBooks that well, like, select by quarter, by year, download as PDF. Here you go. I didn't have a deck. I didn't have slides. I didn't have anything. And then I got back on the phone and they say, we want to invest $25 million. Here's the structure of it, 80 million pre, and here's the terms. And, you still get to control the company. I was like, take yes for an answer. Like
checked all the boxes. Yeah, exactly. You can't say no if they check all the boxes.
Yeah. That's how it happened. And it was, so some part of it is definitely the market, Russ. Like some part of it, I'm not so egotistical to think that like this is possible in any environment, but it also, so we did the deal, we closed the round, all that stuff. And then I thought to myself, I'm like, I never really asked, I don't really know why they're investing. Like, I know that they
Yeah.
like me, I know that they like us, but like, why? So I said, hey, did you do any, like, I don't know if there's an investment memo or like some, like a 1 or 2 page doc that you wrote up for the partners meeting when you did the deal, but I would love to see it just to see what your hypothesis is about our growth. And Peter Fallon, the general partner over at Elephant, immediately sent over a 77-page slide deck that he and his colleague had prepared on investing in us. And that was
Wow.
pretty awesome, just to know that like they'd done a shitload of work actually.
They knew. They
yeah,
knew.
yeah.
And do you think, I mean, I know there's a big trend just talking about community-led growth is like, what's your take on that? Like, do you think that's just, are we early in that innings, or is that like a theme that's been around for a while? Like, what do you think on that front?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I think that like I said, to the point of like me getting fired all the time and like the world changing, I think that the world is changing more quickly than a textbook can accommodate. So I think that like we need communities now because all of our jobs are going to be different in some way, whether it's us, obviously there's dozens, if not hundreds, if not thousands of communities other than ours. So it doesn't have to be ours, but some way there needs to be a way to connect with like-minded peers at similar stages of growth so that you can figure out how the hell you're supposed to do whatever you're supposed to do. And also so that you can like say, what subject line did you use? How did you make LinkedIn advertising work? Like just basic common sense stuff that it's hard to Google. And if you did Google, it's still better to talk to a person about it. So I think that like the persistent need for community is here to stay. I think that there's a big opportunity, which is the one we're pursuing and other companies as well, to rethink the business model around community, because inevitably there's 2 things that happen, right? And this isn't disparaging, this is just a reality. Like you're either owned, if it's free, it's because it's owned by like a software company that ultimately wants to sell you something. That's not a bad thing. That's just like a thing, right? Like
Right.
Gain, Grow, Retain is a really cool customer success community, and they're owned by this software company called Higher Logic, which makes customer success software. That's okay. It just means that it's not independent or autonomous. Otherwise, it's free because a bunch of other sponsors are paying for it. One way or the other, the motivation is not as pure as it could be. When you're paying, it's different. A lot of people don't want to pay. They're like, should I pay? Like, there's a million free places, and I totally get that. Ultimately, paying is useful because it makes you a customer. And Facebook doesn't listen to you and me, Russ, because we don't pay them any money. If we were Procter and Gamble, Facebook would do what we tell them to do. Or if whomever's advertising on there. When you pay, you're the customer. And that means that there's no other ulterior motive other than your desires and needs. And that's why I think it's the business model specifically is interesting. Somebody asked in the chat, what are the dues? So it's $23.50 a year for an executive member. It's $975 a year for an associate member. And then I think it'll be like $600 or $700 a year for an analyst member. We expect that most of those will be paid for by the employers that are subsidizing the professional development. I think community-led growth is here to stay. I think for the reasons that I mentioned, and I think what we're going to see is experimentation around business models.
Yeah, I absolutely love it. I think one thing with the paid participation is also it probably increases user engagement as well. Yeah. You've paid, you're going to use it more, you're going to participate more versus like the free option that's out there. Is definitely one component of it. And yeah, having employers pay for it for professional development. If you think about, accountants, they have professional development courses that they have to do every year. Well, why shouldn't, I think someone in the chat earlier was just talking about tech stacks and how tech is evolving so quickly to give you edges in it. Well, what's your education? What's your plan of attack to stay ahead of the curve in terms of those? I think I just saw a transaction today. ZoomInfo bought Chorus. Is
600 million.
There you go. Like, you got to stay ahead of this because you know what's coming next. More seamless integrations between the two of them, more information sharing, more data integrations, and like, how do you stay ahead of all of this? It really, really interesting concepts around that. Yeah, and I think you're right. It's just going to continue to grow in the future. And even the example of Boast, and we have Traction, which is our community-led growth, where we're over 100,000 subscribers, and we provide content. And again, it goes back to our model. Our model is fuel your growth. We try to help our customers grow. And Traction is how we help them grow, because we hope to give them insights and education on how to grow faster and more efficiently.
And I think,
Yeah,
Russ, to your point, like, I think, what we're talking about, which I think is actually like quite cool and exciting, which is a new type of sales motion, right? And the sales motion is, I mean, this is to the point of our values, to the point of Pavilion, right? The sales motion, it's not that business doesn't happen in Pavilion, even though we have like a no direct solicitation policy. It's the same thing that Boast is doing, right? If I give value, if I help, it doesn't need to be a sales pitch. Like, I can give value, I can help. And in so doing, I establish credibility and trust and authority, right? And then I'm just, when the time comes that the person needs what I have to offer, they're just much more likely to want to do business with me because I've helped them and I haven't asked for anything in return. And I think that that's, people talk about like modern sales, and like, I think that that's a representation of like the purest of sales as the purest, as a pure profession, right? It's not about giving somebody something that they don't need, that they don't want, and shoving it down their throat. It's about, hey, I want to help you. In so doing, I believe that over time, some percentage of my help will redound back to me in the form of karma and closed won deals and revenue growth. But I don't need to explicitly ask for money every single time that I try to help you out.
Yeah, absolutely. I 100% agree with that. And I think that builds into your culture too, when you kind of get into that mentality around it. I want to flip topics and just talk about scaling and some of the key reasons on how you scaled. And this one always catches my eye. And I was actually talking about this morning on a webinar I was doing, why you should hire marketing before sales. And I love this topic. Love to hear your thoughts on that.
Sure. Well, like I said, what I said about compensation is sort of like the talk track, right? Which is that revenue generation is not a sales specific function. It is a company. It is what the company does. And it is the output of the company building a great product, talking about the product in the right way, and getting that product into people's hands. So why do you hire marketing before sales? Because I think that, as I say, a salesperson with 10 meetings or a fully booked calendar and terrible sales process will make you money, right? Because somebody's going to want to buy the thing. One of those people was an inbound late or something, or so desperate. A salesperson, like perfectly Sandler trained, went to force management, has every like understands medic and band and every other thing, but doesn't have any meetings, that person will get fired, right? And that's because the way the hardest thing is not turning meetings into money. That is much more, it's not easy, but it's much more of a commodity. Getting a meeting is the hardest thing. And getting a meeting systematically, like meeting after meeting after meeting. How do you get meetings? You get meetings because you have a product that fits a specific need at a specific time that really does its job in a great way. And then you talk about that product, because software, right, is what we're doing is, because Boast, right, that's a thing that didn't even exist a couple years ago. Like, all of these are not just, they're not just talking about a problem, they are talking about a problem, and then they're saying the way we've designed the solution through software or through anything else is the best way to solve that problem. So we need agreement on the fact that there's a problem, and we need an agreement on also the fact that the way we've designed solving that problem is the best way to solve that problem. All of that is messaging, product development, persona development. All of that is right now the job of marketing, right? The job of marketing is, generally speaking, generate awareness, generate interest so that you can get meetings. I think that that's the thing you need to be great at, right? It doesn't really matter if you have like the best trained reps with the head of enablement that's doing all of the things and you've got all of the systems to, it's like, if you don't have enough meetings, then you can't hire any more salespeople. I see so many companies, they're like, we need a sales leader. Again, just like early stage founders talking to their VCs, none of whom have worked in an operating company a very long time. And they're like, now what you need, you just need a great sales leader. That's the reason you're struggling. It's like, no, that's not true. And also I've seen companies where they've got 3 or 4 or 5 salespeople, right? They've got a prompt, like and everybody's high-fiving and having fun. And maybe they're like 2 million or 1 million in ARR, and they're going to get to 3. And it feels like, now's the time. And by the way, to the point, right, wrapping all of this together, I just like looked at a company that was asking me to invest $3.5 million run rate revenue, $200 million pre-money valuation. So like, let's take that company. They think they're doing great. They think they've got it figured out. And they raise $100 million or whatever they're going to raise, $50 million. And they go out and hire 20 salespeople. All right. So you had 4 people that were crushing their quota, that had like mostly full calendars. You've now added, you've grown the required, the capacity, the meeting availability by 20 times, right? So you're going to need 20 times as many meetings because that's how many people you just hired. Well,
Right.
assuming that we close, 1 out of 5 meetings, like feeding the mouths of 20 salespeople is going to require just so that's the skill that needs, anyway, long-winded way of saying getting a meeting is the most important thing. That's the thing companies need to get good at. And not anybody, but being able to turn a meeting into money is a much more common skill set than being able to get a meeting, which in this crowded world, getting somebody's attention is incredibly hard.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. And I'm along those lines. I find marketing helps with, the messaging, the script, the value proposition, and nailing all of those. And if you don't have those nailed, it doesn't matter how many salespeople you have, because they're not saying the right thing.
Right.
So marketing helps the sales team say the right things at the right times. And I think that's a key component of it.
One other thing I'll just say is like, so then people get this religion, right? And then they're like, okay, I know what I need. I'm going to hire marketing. I'm going to hire a director of demand gen. And because demand gen gets you leads. And Sam said we need meetings. Meetings are leads. So I did this and it's just funny. So demand gen, what is demand gen, just so everybody understands, because there's not really a common definition. Demand gen is the act of delivering a specific message to a specific group of people at a specific time. So if you hire a director of demand gen before you have your messaging, you are, as they say, putting the cart before the horse. I hired a director of demand gen at Livestream. And I said, Carly, why aren't we getting more leads? She said, well, what am I supposed to say in the ads? What do you mean?
It's true. It's
Tell
so
them
true.
to buy Livestream. She's like, well, I think they need more than that.
Yeah. And it's so interesting. And I see people fall into that trap all the time. They still end up sales. And it's like, but do you have your messaging right? Are you ready? Because you can't scale if you're not ready to scale.
That's right. And
you
the other,
jumping the gun on it.
it's very, it's like a very, you can see founders, their faces sink. You can see them get depressed because it's not just that you need to invest in marketing. It's that marketing takes a long time to work, right? It's right. Not something you can snap your fingers on because you need to create the messaging. What's the lead to, first of all, there's an awareness to lead time that we probably only know about through something like Sixth Sense. And then there's the lead to opportunity time. The point is most of the things that people are working on, aren't going to pay dividends for probably till next year. And so that right. is super upsetting. It's like, well, what do you mean? That's March. Of course, if we hire a VP of marketing, we can hit Q4. It's like you have a 6-month sales cycle and you have 3 months from lead to opportunity. So actually the year's over, just so you know, like right. the year's right. done. We're talking about 2022 now. They're like, no way, I don't believe that. I'm like, well, I'm sorry.
And you layer that on top of short tenures, and no wonder it's a hamster wheel that we're on. You don't even have enough sales cycles to go through to solve the problems. Yeah. I would love to talk about like your thoughts around unit economics and product market fit.
Sure. Well, same thing. There's a pure. So again, for the folks on the line, when I say unit economics sounds kind of fancy, it's not fancy. It just means how much do you spend to get a customer, all the things that we were just talking about, right? Get their attention, send them a message, make that message compelling, get them to want to take a look. How much do you spend to get them versus how much they pay you back and how long they stick around. And that's what unit economics is. And not enough. So what they do is they tell you about your business. And yes, you need a little bit of scale, and inevitably they're going to get worse, particularly from the very earliest stages when you're like paying everybody under market salaries and you don't have a sales team, but all you have is inbound leads. But the point fundamentally is like good unit economics. For example, if you are paid back on your investment in under 12 months, I think that that's very, very good. Many VCs will tell you, 2 years payback period is is good enough. I don't think so. I think you really want to be shooting for, you spend $50 to get a customer, they've paid you back in terms of gross margin, in terms of like profit, they've paid you back that $50 within 12 months. But the point is like, how do you not spend? So what's the point? The point is that how do you get a customer without spending a lot of money to tell them that you exist? Well, how do you do that? You do that because they hear about you from other people. They hear good things about you from other people. That tells you that the product is good. How do you spend a lot of money and they don't stick around very long, and they don't pay you back as much as you spent to get them? The opposite, of course, is true, right? If you're spending a ton of money and they're skeptical and they're hesitant and they ask their friends and their friends don't like your product, then you're going to have a mismatch in terms of how much you spent to get the customer versus how much they pay you. And I find that, so that's the basic point, which is that not enough sales leaders specifically, but really not enough executives think about that. And so, I had a conversation with somebody in Pavilion, and she said she was running this, very thorough interview process to find the best company. And I said, well, how are you figuring out who the best company is? And she said, whoever raises the most money. And I said, well, that's not really, it might be like loosely correlated, but it's not, it's correlation without causation. And I'm trying to teach the world, but especially, my members and other people, like, hey, let's have a lens through which we can evaluate a company, ultimately, probably that derives down to whether or not people like the product and continue to use it, especially in a subscription economy. So that's what, the analysis of unit economics helps you do, is just helps you understand, like, hey, do we have a good thing here, or is something off? Sometimes, for example, you might say, like, you're charging, because oftentimes pricing has obviously a big lot to do with it. And it's like, well, we can't, we need to have one-to-one SDR to account executive ratios. We need to really do very specific account-based marketing, so that, like, which just means more expensive marketing, of course. And our average deal size is $10,000 a year. And it's like, well, that's probably, if that's all you can charge, because that's what the market says you can charge, then you have a bad money machine. You need a better money machine if you need that many resources to get a customer.
Yeah. And all of you saying this all comes back to this whole community-led growth thing, which is why it's so hot right now. If you have a community around your product, your customer acquisition cost around that community-led growth is really, really low. Hence why we're probably seeing a lot of VCs circling around and buzzing around, because you can lower your customer acquisition cost with this channel.
Which is a more sophisticated way of still making exactly the same point we were making before. Same thing as product-led growth, right? Which is, like, fundamentally, the future of sales is that people are going to have lots of experiences with your product and with your company before they make a decision to buy, and they better be good.
Right. And that viral or community-led recommendations also shortens that cycle. It has a different bias when someone goes in and starts using that product or that experience, all tying back together. Very interesting. Would love to jump to this one. So, bootstrap 0 to 10, like, how do you see the transition as you, embark on your next goal, call it 100 million? Like, what does that team look like? What are your big strategies that you need to put in place that you're thinking about to kind of get to that next milestone?
Well, I think it's a great question. The first thing that changes when you go from bootstrapped to in the way that I described that we did it, right? Which is that people were able to make some money from the financing event, and we didn't just sign up for a huge. I could have pushed to the point of like a $3.5 million company at 200 pre. Like, I could have pushed the valuation more. I didn't want to, right? Not just because I thought what they offered was incredibly fair, but because I want a $300 million exit to be a good outcome. If that's what ends up happening, I don't want it to be a disappointment or God forbid, have the board block it. So the way that we did that deal is interesting, because what it did is it unlocked ambition, is the honest truth. Like, when you're a bootstrap company, you're very conservative or I was conservative, because the money in the company checking account was my life savings, one way or the other. Like, I didn't have anything else. Not meaningful. And so now that we're better capitalized and we did it in the way that we did it, now the money in the checking account is a strategic asset, right? It's not as personal to me. It's just the company.
Right.
I split my personal identity from the company in a useful way so that we can become more ambitious. So what happens next in terms of professionalization and in terms of growth? Well, like I said, to the point of the acquisitions, one thing I think is that there are dozens, if not hundreds, if not thousands of other communities out there. And I think that what we've discovered is that, communities need leadership. And I don't have, and we don't have credibility to be the leaders of a finance pavilion in absentia, right? Because don't have that background, but there are finance leaders that do. And so then the theory of the case is, well, many of these communities are probably worth very little on their own, but as part of a global pavilion, maybe the common currency of our equity makes them worth much, much more. Maybe the whole is much, much greater than the sum of the individual parts. And I think in this instance, that's probably true. So I think that there's a path to acquisition. And I also think there's a path to creating enough infrastructure so that people want to start their communities under the umbrella of Pavilion. And it's, something, it feels a little bit like meetup.com if Meetup was a little bit more capitalist and a little bit less, socialist, to be honest. It's like we have a point of view, we have a structure, we have a team, right? We have member success, we have a process, we have investments that we make to make your experience uniform and amazing, right? We want to be the American Express black card for your career. We want to be that special secret door that you have that gives you access to the best jobs, the best training, the best community, the best support, and a company that truly cares about you. So I think that there's a lot of people that are probably like, there's a group of people that are like, this has to be about me. I need to become a millionaire. I'm not selling, I want to do this on my own. There's probably a lot of people that are saying that hear that phrase, that message, and that think about the vision of the world that we want to create and think, that sounds pretty cool. I'm willing to do that under the context of Pavilion. So that's part of like the growth is standing up these functional communities in all of these other areas and making sure that they work and making sure that they don't suck. And then it's just continuing to, it's taking margin and reinvesting it back into membership. So, our business model originally was like, hey, a tremendous percentage of the dues out to the chapter heads in all of these different cities. And we are evolving that. We're going to pay those people less because the strategy is pay lots and lots of people. So the other part that we're trying to reinvent is we're trying to quell the idea that everything has to be a volunteer job. So we are going to be taking a little bit of the margin that we used to pay the chapter head in Toronto, Butch Langlois, and we're going to pay it to people that teach a course through our university, that facilitate a mastermind group every month, that lead the finance pavilion in Toronto, and basically create a structure where we can redistribute dues out to as many different people as possible so that they have some support for their micro community leadership.
Now everybody can actually get a side gig for real this time, though.
Exactly. I mean, it's not going to be a ton, but that's exactly the point. I work for this company, Gerson Lerman Group, which is an expert network business, right? And so it was hedge funds and investors would pay Gerson Lerman Group, and then Gerson Lerman Group pays you and me to be experts. And the business is the arbitrage; they pay us by the minute, and hedge funds pay them a tremendous amount of money, or strategy consulting firms. Right. And the reason that business is amazing but has some difficulty is that we were always viewed as the product. I was a widget. I was a widget that needed to be sold to make margin on. And I always said, what would the business be that Gerson Lerman Group experts would pay to be members of? And that's what Pavilion is. So when we introduce consulting opportunities, it's going to be gravy. It's not that you're an input into my hedge fund business. You are the business. And as part of the business, I want to find ways to help you make money.
Yeah. It makes a ton of sense. It gives people that extra incentive to participate in the community, from both sides, from the membership due side and from the content creation side, which just feeds on itself, which is amazing. Two concepts I just want to touch on. We were talking about product market fit, and just curious on your side for go-to-market fit. Do you have like an outbound team currently with your model, or how are you guys structured? Do you have SDRs and AEs, or?
We have SDRs and AEs. They all started in the last 2 or 3 months, but the outbound that they do is for corporate subscriptions. So that's when I say a transformational gathering place for high growth individuals and their teams. That's what I'm talking about. So what we do is we go out to companies and we say, this is truly, because companies are evaluating like individual training solutions. Maybe they're evaluating like a coaching solution or, mentorship. And we can say, take, your whole team, and your worries that you're not going to do this right. You're not going to take care of them right. It's a fluid labor market, and you're not going to, and they're going to leave for a better job. And let's imagine a world where they get all of the training that they need, and not just one time, but on an ongoing basis. They get mentorship and coaching so that they can talk to people that have been there, done that. They get a community of like-minded peers, and they just get ongoing professional. So you don't have to, if you're the CRO or, eventually the CFO or whatever organization you're running, like, you don't even have to worry about it. We'll take care of it. We'll train them. We'll teach them. We'll coach them. They'll get call coaching. They'll get all of the things that you need, and it'll be, frankly, probably cheaper than the other options that you're looking at.
And more current, more relevant, more
Nice.
up to date on trends, for sure. Funny how that ties back into that whole marketing before sales aspect. Just that whole skills transformation pitch is very much a marketing message for you going to, the enterprise corporate world and selling it into. And that's the key to marketing. That messaging makes sense for them, which is totally funny how it goes through that.
The interesting thing, which is why, the interesting thing about the company is, here's the metric that we run the company on. We run it on NPS. And that determines end of year bonuses for pretty much everybody at the company, not the revenue target. And it's because what makes the corporate offering possible is the fact that we have 2 out of 3 people absolutely love what we're doing. So we have thousands of warm leads, all coming from individual memberships of sales leaders and marketing leaders that have signed up and achieved success. And again, that's just the point of us drinking, or me drinking our own Kool-Aid, or eating our own dog food, or whatever you want to say, which is I firmly believe people have problems with the NPS metric, mainly around the phrasing of the question of, would you recommend this versus how happy are you, or whatever. But I only care about it because it's a question asked the same way over time that I can benchmark, the relative answer to. But the point is that fundamentally, I'm trying to do the thing that I tell other people to do, which is I want to run the company first and foremost on people liking the product. If people love the product, then everything else will follow. Revenue will follow, growth will follow. But if people don't like the product, then all of this will grind to a screeching halt. So first and foremost is always focus on your customer, focus on your product. Then you can focus on marketing. I want sales. I want this to be a small sales team of people that are just catching the leads, who have full calendars and are high-fiving the whole time. And the way to do that is to always focus first and foremost on the customer.
Yeah. Provide value to your customers.
Exactly.
And absolutely, I'm totally aligned with that. One question just pressing on my mind, love the whole SDR conversation. Do SDRs report into marketing or sales? Do you have a preference? Is there different scenarios where different things work better?
I have 2. So first, I don't have a preference. They report to sales. I think they should report to the best manager that has the bandwidth to treat them well. There are pros and cons to each. That's thought 1. Thought 2 is my friend Mark Kornfeld, who's the president of Vimeo, and he's a technologist, made this really interesting comment. He said, engineering has product management. The product manager is responsible for is the orchestration of the development, the writing of the code, but they're also responsible for talking to the customer. There's no point at which they stop and some other product management function happens. They own the whole thing that happens the whole time. And he's because he was CEO of Livestream and he had to dip his hands into revenue leadership, he's I don't see anything like that in revenue. Right? The marketing team writes the messaging, but then the SDRs report somewhere else, and the sales team is doing their own messaging, but maybe working with marketing. And there's no product management job for revenue. There's not one job, maybe it's the CRO, I guess, that orchestrates the entire customer journey from one perspective, which I think is really interesting.
Yeah, that's kind of my view on it. The CRO function is really holistic revenue as a company, and how that all funnels into product-led growth, community-led growth, marketing growth, sales teams, and all of that functioning in, and having that holistic view and making those decisions for those functions that are in the best interest of the companies, not best decisions for those silos, which is where that leadership comes in. So no, very, very interesting on that side. In terms of, you guys rolling out, love talking about new tech. That was something we talked about a couple times in our conversation. Any new tech? What's the tech stack look like? Is there any new tricks or tools that you're seeing?
That would be a question for our tech stack channel. However,
Yeah.
I mean, I'll tell you that one of my good friends is Nicholas Vandenberg, and he's the CEO and co-founder of Chili Piper with his wife, Alina. And I just think that's such an interesting company. They raised $33 million recently, and you would just, because what it is meeting automation. It's like Calendly, but there's important reasons why it's not. But I just think that the fact that that is a category unto itself is just what's so interesting about markets, about this thing that you'd think would just be a feature of Outreach or a feature of Gong is an entirely different company. And so we're using it, we're about to install it because people apply to join, and then we're routed to our enrollment managers, but it takes some time to get on their calendars. And their new concierge product at Chili Piper has a means of automatically routing. It's just rules-based meeting routing.
Yeah.
So it's like, they asked, this is in the West, this goes to this enrollment manager. We automatically know to present that person's calendar so that we can book the meeting, and it's this level of person, therefore it should go to this person. Otherwise it would have gone to that person. So that's a tool that I'm pretty excited to implement. And that's the one that I'm, most familiar with, I guess, right now.
Yeah, you know what? And funny you mentioned that. That's probably the fourth time I've heard about it in the last 2 months. So there's definitely something catching some market buzz around it. So there's the promoter. That's it. That's it. And we're in a community channel right now. Exactly. So it's community led.
You figured it all out.
That's it. It's amazing. Just doing a time check on here. I know we only got a couple minutes left. I could ask you questions all day and really, really appreciate the insight you've shared. Sam, that was fantastic. Just want to make sure the viewers out there who might want to connect and check out Pavilion, how can they get a hold of you guys to kind of check it out?
Sure. It's first of all, if you have any questions, you can email me directly. It's sam@joinpavilion.com. Obviously the website is Join Pavilion. And take a look. It's we've got sales, marketing, customer success. Over the next couple of weeks, we'll be standing up finance and a CEO community. Next year, you can expect people/HR, legal, and then a bunch of other weird ones if people want to start them. I think there's going to be a cannabis pavilion because there's so much growth in the cannabis space, for example. Started by a guy from Toronto, Shabazz. So,
there you go.
There's like a micro community that needs resources so that you can bring your people together and you don't have to worry about doing all the heavy lifting. We're here to help you.
Amazing. I think it's a fantastic idea. I love it. I love the community-led growth aspect of it and getting insights from people who are on the front lines and actually doing the work. And that's where you get the real insights for, hacks that really make a difference. So Sam, thanks again for joining us today. Thank you everybody for joining another Traction episode. Check out our website, boast.ai. You can see all of our Traction videos and check out some other amazing content we put on. And thanks again for everybody. And thanks, Sam. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.